Hi, welcome to Hix at Home and welcome to Hix's Smoking House, kindly made by my lovely next door neighbour Ron, who lives just down the hill. So, I sort of erected this during last lockdown and carried on the tradition of smoking at home. I first started smoking my own salmon just before I opened the Oyster and Chop House about 13 years ago. And I did a little experiment. I phoned up my friend Richard Cook at 7 & Y Smokery and said, what's the best way to cure my own salmon and smoke it? So he gave me a few tips. I got this lovely smoker from Bradley, and my very first experiment with the salmon was a 10-hour cure with Billington's molasses sugar and rock salt, and 10 hours cure, and then I did a 10-hour smoke, and that was my very first experiment. And I used apple and oak in my first experiment, 50-50. So to this day I still use exactly the same cure for my salmon. And what I've been doing recently is experimenting with herrings, some whitefish, anchovies, fresh anchovies from Plymouth, and Lewis from Sound Seafood has pelagic boats which do mackerel, herrings, anchovies and sardines. So we have a great connection there, and yeah, I've just been experimenting. So the interesting thing is when you cure the salmon, you get lots of lovely liquid come out of it. So I just do a very quick cure on the anchovies, just for about an hour. With the herring fillets, about 2 hours or so, and then a quick 1 hour smoke. So here's my smoker. At the moment I've just got some herrings in there. I've got some sea bass and pollock fillets. And I've just got some little bits and pieces which I had left over from the fish truck. So it's always a good way, like the end of a Saturday when we finish trading, I fillet any fish off and get it smoked, so it's for fish pie, or sometimes I do just a platter of smoked fish, if you like, on the truck. So there's lots of different options, and it's a great way to utilise fish that potentially would, go off and get thrown away. So we're going to go upstairs and have a little play around with these three ingredients, which are going to be in your next fish box: salmon, anchovies and smoked herring. Okay, here we are back in the kitchen, and just to recap, we're going to do 3 dishes. So the smoked herrings, which are essentially kippers, but I like to trim them up a bit more than kippers so you haven't got the heads on, so they're fairly boneless. The anchovies I'm going to do with beetroot and horseradish, and I'm just going to talk a bit about the salmon and how I carve it, and the flavour profile and the quality of the fish. So this is a really good simple brunch or breakfast dish. A little bit of butter, and it'll go in the oven just for about 10 minutes. So these are not actually cooked, they're smoked. So these are cold smoked and cured just like the salmon. So all they really need is about 10 minutes in the oven. Now we're going to serve it with colcannon, which is a classic Irish dish and goes really well with smoked fish. So what I've got is some mashed potato, I've got some kale which I've blanched, I've got spring onions which I've just chopped up. They're going to be just lightly infused and blanched, if you like, in some hot milk. A little bit of sea salt and pepper. Cornish sea salt, of course. It's my go-to flaky sea salt. So what we're going to do is heat the spring onions up, because they don't take an awful lot of cooking, and then mix it with the mashed potato and kale, which is going to make a colcannon. Now some people just put kale in, some people put a mixture of spring onions and kale, but I always find that the green onions or spring onions give the colcannon a really nice flavour, which does go really well with the fish. Now if you want to be a little bit adventurous, you can make a little mustard sauce with this. But today, as a sort of breakfast brunchy dish, I'm really just going to do it with the poached egg. So, I'm just going to get some vinegar. Now when you're poaching eggs, and I'll show you in a sec, a little bit of vinegar in the water, you never quite know how fresh the eggs are that you buy, and what the vinegar does, it helps to coagulate the egg whites to surround the eggs. So some local eggs from a farm in Musbury. We've got our spring onions now just cooking. Get the kale in. In with the mashed potato. I love all the different variations of mashed potato, you know, mustard mash with sausages, caramelised onion mash, and this sort of go-to classic Irish is also one of my favourites. It goes really well with things like smoked ham hock and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to leave that on there to heat through. A little poached egg tip. Some people get a bit flustered when they're poaching eggs, and I've seen people trying to sort of crack the egg in the pan and the shell breaks and suddenly you've got egg all over the stove. So a quick way, whether you're doing 2 eggs, 4 eggs, 6 eggs, is crack them into cups. Once that's come to the boil, then it's all easy from there in. Slotted spoon. And before you put your eggs in, and you'll see how easy it is with the cups, you want to get the water rolling, as in a rolling boil. I'm just going to pop a little bit of salt in there as well. A little bit of butter in the calcannon. So that's a rolling boil. So what we do is we just drop the eggs from the cup straight in. Turn it down a little bit. A little bit of kitchen paper for when the eggs are ready. Oops. Try not to boil it over like I've just done. Luckily I've got a very good Fisher Paykel induction which cleans well. Otherwise on some of those old range cookers by now I'd be pulling the range cooker apart and trying to clean it, but these things just clean up really nicely, especially if you just made a little spillage like I have. So these smell great, and all we're doing really is just warming them through. Right, check our eggs. So you can see they've just come together nicely. So that's not quite there yet. So just with a spatula or palette knife, you want to lift your herring fillets. Just give that a final little stir. So just draw that off a bit on the kitchen paper and straight onto the herring. There we go. A nice simple smoked herring, cold cannon and a poached egg. Okay, next dish up is our beetroot and smoked anchovies. So there's a couple of ways you can present this, really up to you. If you've got kind of smallish beets like this, you can cut them into chunks and arrange them on the plate. I quite like doing it like this. So with a mandolin or a very sharp knife, you want to slice your cooked beetroots. And this is a great dish to do for a dinner party in advance, because all you're doing is laying these things out. And this dish is going to be on the menu at the Fox when I open in a couple of weeks' time. So I suppose in some ways it resembles a bit of a carpaccio. Make sure you wash your hands when you're doing beetroot, otherwise everything goes red. Now I'm just going to season the beetroot a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of my homemade vinegar. I never throw wine away. Not that I've always got a lot of wine left in bottles, but any wine that I do have, I start it with a cider vinegar mother. So a bit like if you're making kombucha. And I've got a little wooden barrel in my larder, which I keep all the vinegar in. So once I've made it into vinegar, I'll then put it in a wooden barrel. And I've tried emulating a sort of, almost like a balsamic vinegar, where I reduce down the vinegar, basically just boil it up. And I think beetroots, and we're all sort of used to eating beetroots slightly pickled, but this is a bit more of a sophisticated version. So you can either do your anchovies whole, or they're quite rich and luxurious, so I'm going to cut them in half. scatter them around on the beets. A little bit of rapeseed oil. And to finish, some freshly grated horseradish. Now, if you can't get fresh horseradish, you can buy that sort of grated stuff that's in the jar, which will be fine. And if you really can't get that either, you know, you can put a blob of horseradish sauce in the middle. So I'm just going to grate this just before you serve it to your guests. There we go. Plymouth Sound anchovies, smoked with beetroot and horseradish. Okay, now the easy bit. Not that the other two were that difficult, but for the smoked salmon. So when I first started smoking it, as I said, 13 years ago, I had a similar sort of smoker set up in my back garden, which was in an area called de Beauvoir in Hackney. So I sort of named the smoked salmon de Beauvoir smoked salmon Hix Cure after the area. And now I'm smoking it here in Charmouth at my house, which is called the Flodge. The reason it's called the Flodge is because it used to be called F Lodge, or Lodge F actually. And a couple of artist friends of mine, whilst I was out one day, took the F off the lodge bit and put it at the front. So from there on, it's always been called Flodge. So in case you look at our menus these days and see Flodge smoked salmon, that's where it is downstairs. So when I first started smoking it, I wanted it to be a little bit unique. You know, I was taught when I first moved to London that you should slice salmon as thinly as possible, so that you could almost see the plate through it. At the time, I didn't really think that much about it, but when I started smoking my own, I suddenly thought, you know, if you've got a really good RSPCA salmon, which, if you look at that, there's no big blobs of fat. You know, you buy salmon from the supermarkets, vacuum packed, you often open it up and there's big white blobs in there. And it's, this you can see, it's almost like a wild salmon. And what I wanted to do was sort of emulate what they do in Scandinavia, where they slice it quite thickly. So what I've always done is I've done about 4-5 slices. Easy to slice, look at that. Nice and thick, and that way, and cutting it this way, not that way, you get the taste of the smoke on the outside and you get the quality of the fish in the middle. And you really don't need to do anything to this apart from eat it. And I always put people off squeezing lemon all over it, because lemon is going to kill that natural smoky flavour, and really all you want to do is taste the salmon and the smokiness. And all you really need with this is some brown bread and butter or some hot buttered toast, and nothing else at all. So this will keep in your fridge for a week or so, and you know, don't pre-slice it, just lob a bit off as you need it. If you come out at night, have a bit of smoked salmon on toast. And there we are, very simple. It's an artisan product from my garden at the Flodge. So good luck with the smoked fish box, and I'll let you know soon what's going to be next.